And for tonight, our fabulous speaker is Trent Gonzalez from GeckBro, and he's going to be talking to us about leopard geckos.
What's up, everybody? Thank you for coming. Welcome to Leopard Geckos 101. I'm Trent. I own GeckBro Co. We'll get started. I'll tell you a little about me, about the natural history of leopard geckos, captive husbandry, morphs, and then why they're so popular. So, starting off, I've always loved animals. I've always had pets. My mom had a ball python when we were really little. Ever since, I was a little tiny. I loved animals. Go to the zoo all the time. I got my first gecko when I was maybe 12 years old. We went to PetSmart, and I freaked out and cried the whole way home until we went back and got it the next day. We went through a couple different names. I always thought somebody was going to ask me the name of my leopard gecko, and I was so nervous that I wouldn't have like the coolest name for my leopard gecko. So I remember the exact date. I was sitting there. We were walking in line like 5th grade, and I was like, okay, GeckBro, that's the coolest name for a gecko. And nobody ever asked me, but I always had that in my mind. And I've always had pets too, like, like rats and mice, corn snakes throughout my life. So I got a little bit older, I had a little bit more freedom. I started collecting more reptiles, going to all the reptile shows, and things got like more serious. I started collecting a lot of animals. I had a couple geckos. Yeah. I had a couple geckos, and then I started a feeder colony, and I was like, okay, well, I can do maybe 5 geckos, and then I have this whole empty wall over there. I could fill that up with enclosures and have 10 geckos, and it just exploded. I went to the Sacramento Reptile Show, and I bought some geckos there, and when I was leaving, I was thinking about how did this guy just take my money for these geckos? What did I pay for? How is he paying his employees with just geckos? And it just boggled my mind. I couldn't figure out how he was like living off geckos. That was my dream. And at the time I was working in a restaurant, it just wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't finish high school, I didn't go to college, so I didn't feel like my future was right in front of me, and I couldn't see what I was going to do. So I was always looking for something to do for myself. And that was kind of the pivotal moment in my life. So after a few months, I started working. I was on Indeed looking for a new job. I started working for the guy that sold me the geckos in the first place, working a large collection. Me and my friend James got hired at the same time. At the time we weren't super close friends, but we worked together. We did the same stuff all the time. And after a minute, we were the best of friends. We hang out every week. We made a podcast together. We kind of pushed each other to do bigger, better things with the geckos and the animals. Ended up going in on a couple geckos together. I hatched my first gecko in March of 2019. It was a crested gecko, hence the crested gecko logo. So that's when I realized I'm a father now. It was a huge, when I hatched my first gecko, I was freaking out. I was like, what if I hatch 20 geckos? What am I going to do with all these geckos? And after the first one came out, I was like, okay, I want to hatch 150 geckos. I want as many as I can get. So I was going to the reptile shows. I sat at this top picture. That's me at Glen Reptiles booth in 2019. Those were all the animals I had, from that tall cup to these white cups over here. That's all I brought with me. It was maybe 20 animals, which was enough. But the night before, I cried. I was like, I don't want to sell the animals. I wish I could just keep them and make money keeping them. But it was, if I wanted to get more animals, I had to make more space and make more money to buy more animals. So it kind of ebbed and flowed. I went to a few reptile shows. I didn't have a name for myself. I would just kind of show up and be Trent. And I realized the marketing is a good thing. I put my name on it. That's what people are buying their animals from, these big guys that have been around for a long time, they know their name. So I thought about it for a while. I settled on GeckBro Co. It's a combination of skateboarding, art, and geckos. And since then, I've just taken things one step at a time every day. I wanted to build something for myself that was going to be bigger than myself. So I just one step at a time every day. I'd post on Instagram, feed my geckos, just whatever it was, reaching out to somebody, making a friend. So the support of my friends and family has come a long way. I went, like I said, from 0 animals to over 200 or 300 in just like 2 or 3 years. So I've got my parents, my mom keeps snakes at her house, my dad keeps lizards at his house. We have geckos that live in the living room. I've taken over almost every space of every inch of everybody's house with animals. So leopard geckos took over my life. I've bred a lot of geckos, crested geckos, horny geckos, knobtails, you name it, I worked with it or bred it. But leopard geckos are my passion. It's a perfect animal. There's nothing better than a leopard gecko in my opinion. So I've continued practice, patience, and study with them. I've hatched over probably close to 500 geckos, but I've cared for thousands of animals in large collections. Right now I'm managing a large collection of boa constrictors, which is different. I like it, but it's not like the geckos, right? It's a little bit different. I do have experience working in these large collections, and I've also studied with the Amphibian Foundation. I got my Master Herpetologist certificate, which is not like I went to college or something, but it is like, it gave me a little bit more confidence going into these breeding facilities and saying, I have this on my resume. It kind of helped me out a little bit. It gave my confidence, getting a better understanding of evolution, how the animals work and what to do for them. So that's a little bit about me. We'll talk about the geckos from here on. They do come from a wide range. I ran to West India.
Next time.
Okay, here's my map. I drew that one. You can see they do have like a huge range. It covers multiple different countries. And so they're also extremely hardy and adaptable animals, thriving in many different environments. Captive lines have been traced back to Karachi, Pakistan, which is mostly where our geckos come from. We're not really getting like macularius geckos from India. We do have over 40 geckos in the Eugloparis family, but the ones we're talking about today are macularius, which are, they come from a few places, but they have been traced back to the Pakistani lines. Here's some natural habitats. So Muhammad Sharif Khan he's a researcher, herpetologist, went to go find leopard geckos in the wild. And these are some different places he was able to find them. You can see they're not like completely deserty, like they are dry and they're rocky, but it's not like a sandy dunes desert. There's a lot of vegetation. See these little plants here, it's not like the brightest thing, but see these little plants here, that's like a lot of grass over there. So they come from not exactly where I had initially thought, right? When I was keeping my gecko when I was probably 12 or 13, I had him in a 10-gallon, he was on just sand, and there was one hide in the middle of the enclosure, and it was as hot as I could get it. He did good, but the adaptive husbandry has come a long way. There's multiple ways to keep animals now, and kind of learning more goes along with that. So in Malacan, Pakistan, which is somewhere I found on iNaturalist, which leopard geckos were living, there's a giant range in temperature from 39 to 105. Since the rest of this is sort of a summary of the Muhammad Sharif Khan research, in Pakistan, geckos thrive in stony countryside. I don't need to read it to you guys. So they come from little holes and crevices. A lot of times they'll be found in man-made structures. If you were to live out there, you might find them living underneath your house if you have like leafy heights, because they have a predilection for higher humidity rather than super dry, arid climates. Several animals may live in a colony, so post-breeding colony will look a lot like pre-breeding colony. Will have mostly subadults and adults, and then the post-breeding colony is dominated by juveniles. They're opportunistic predators, so the bigger males may end up eating the smaller geckos. They eat basically anything that moves and that they can fit their mouth on, from small animals, small mammals, reptiles, birds, mostly insects, but sometimes they'll eat their own little geckos. They will eat baby mice. That's something that happens in the wild. I wouldn't feed mice in captivity just because we have like a wider range of captive insects. I've seen it happen before. I'm not totally against it, but I think that's just might be a little bit too much. Our animals are also line bred. The captive lines that we have been captive since like the 1960s, so they're not necessarily requiring that giant diet that we want to do. Okay, yeah. This is from 2019. They found 2 male leopard geckos hibernating about 5.5 feet up in a tree, under the bark of a dead tree. That was, when I found that out, my jaw dropped. I was like, I thought they lived on the ground. Like, I thought they lived in a little sandy desert area, but no, they actually live in like well-vegetated areas. This is in Nepal, mind you. I mean, not like Pakistan, where a lot of the geckos are coming from. But this did expand their range about 500 kilometers. They were found in the middle of a tree, like almost as tall as I am. They climbed all the way up there and hid underneath the bark, and we found 2 male leopard geckos. Another example of where they come from, this is a stony wall. Oh, hold on. No, we'll go back. Okay, yeah. It's a stony wall. I don't know if I'm on the right side here. We'll find out. So this is a wall that they were seeing the leopard geckos come in and out of. It was going to be demolished, so they just segmented it out to see the inside. Here is basically like the opening. This is where the resting spaces are. This is a lavatory. The female might lay her eggs right here, you know. So I thought that was pretty interesting. They don't build their own burrows, so they are commonly found in man-made structures in urban areas. And they will come out at night and they go back into their hive basically in the morning. So they're crepuscular. Cover that line. Something you can do is use iNaturalist. I don't know if everybody uses iNaturalist, but it's one of my favorite tools. You can get on there and search for whatever animal you keep. This one are kind of leopard geckos. So leopard geckos. You can see the variety of habitats they live in, including arid, rocky places and some highly grassy vegetated places as well. This is a leopard gecko. This is research grade. Something about iNaturalist is it's like checked by your peers. Other people will come and confirm your ID. So these are natural or scientific quality, something like that. I forget the word. You can see this is a map on iNaturalist. It will show you all the information, the date and the time they were found, the location. So I pulled up a satellite map, and you can maybe not see super well, but there's like cities here. There's a lot of trees there. Same thing with the other side. There's a lot of trees there. They're kind of on the outskirts of it. So they're not living in dry deserts. Okay, that was a little bit about the natural history. Something that I kind of found extra interesting for myself learning. We'll cover some captive husbandry. So tank size, I would say bigger is better. Provide multiple options for your geckos to warm up, cool off, and select humidity levels. So I like to have like a warm side, a cool side that might coincide with like a damp side and a dry side. There's multiple methods. What works for your animal and your situation may not work for everybody. What I tell you today may not be like what you want to hear or exactly what you're doing at your house. And if you have a gecko that's thriving, I don't see why you would need to change a lot. I mean, it's important that you're doing more research and adapting your husbandry accordingly, but just like, don't take this as like the Bible, right? So yeah, considering the previous slides, how do they live and survive in the wild, try to replicate their natural habitat, that's my best advice. They have a lifespan of 25 years in captivity, so it's a big commitment as well. It's not something you want to like dive right into, buy a bunch of them. It's not like a lot of money either, so you have to kind of really love leopard geckos if you want to do it. Adapting husbandry techniques, kind of like I said before, I used to have my gecko in a 10-gallon on sand, and I had one hide in the middle of the tank, light right on top of that, so we didn't really have a lot of places to escape the heat. Currently, I'm not keeping them on like a loose sand. I have a warm side on one side of the tank, cool side on the other. Just because there's more research out, there's a lot of resources. People have been feeding leopard geckos since like the 60s. They're used in laboratory experiments. So there's a lot of resources. People have, I think there's like 27 generations in captivity. So there is a lot of resources out there. Just look into them. Just Google leopard gecko. I mean, I'm sure you're all here for a reason. It's not that you guys came to a herpetology meeting because you don't know learn about reptiles. So that's a good sign, right? Husbandry quality significantly impacts the overall health of the reptiles, and reptiles.com is a good source for husbandry resources. Basically, for any popular captive reptile, should have resources there for you. More specifically, I keep my geckos 70 to 77 on the cool side. Worms had about 91, and then they can even have a basket spot 94 to 97. I have a light cycle in there, which is just like an ambient light. You can use an LED light on your enclosure. You can use a UVB light. I have a bright light in my room that goes 12 hours a day. It kind of dims on, dims off. So they have like a period of like it goes from dark to super bright all of a sudden. I mean, it can, but that's kind of my. Bigger is better. Your gecko will use all the space that's provided. Ground space is most important, but they'll use vertical space as well. Like we talked about, they were found almost 5.5 feet up off the ground. So when you're supporting their climbing, they'll probably take that. I even had geckos that used to jump. I had one leopard gecko, and I would leave the top off of his cage, and every day I would come, not every day, but there was a couple of days I came back and he was not in there anymore. So I was like, how is he climbing up the glass? Like, what is he doing? So I sat there, I put a camera on, I sat there for like hours, and I waited and I watched him. And he would come out and he would stand up on his back 2 legs and he would launch himself up over the side of the enclosure. Which is like, I had never heard of that. I was going on to these different forums and no one was talking about how leopard geckos jump out of the enclosure. So, yeah, if you want to see it, send me a message and I'll show it to you. I didn't include it in the slide just because I wasn't able to find the video. Pretty sure it's on my Instagram though. So it's important you're keeping the enclosure dry, but you also provide a humidity high. A common issue is getting your stuck shed on your toes, not on your toes, but they'll get it stuck on their nose, on their eyes, and that can be avoided easily with just having a humid hide in there. 30 to 80% is good, but you can have like spikes or low times, and that works well. Here's a couple examples of different enclosures. Something you might notice right away is just the different sizes, the different substrate. It's kind of up to you. I mean, you don't want to use like a reptile carpet because they can get their fingers and their mouth stuck on it. But something I found that works is this like looser, like a cocoa fiber or ABG mix. Paper towels are pretty good. Holds the humidity, keeps it a little bit dry. All of these enclosures have a light. They have a warm hide, a cool hide, a water dish, a thermostat, which is important. You want to have your gecko at the right temperature. You don't want to burn it. And just decoration.
What's the substrate in the upper left?
I think those are tiles.
Oh.
Oh, I'm going back. So geckos, they're insectivores. They eat insects. Basically any feeder insect you can get, they'll munch it. I've seen people use grasshoppers, hornworms. I use cockroaches, mealworms, black swordfish larvae a lot, crickets, not so much. But all of these can be purchased at like a PetSmart, Petco, or a local reptile shop. They have a Herpetarium. One by me is Aquarium Depot.
GX3.
Exactly.
Where you get 10% discount if you're a member.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We'll
That's
plug
what,
there.
honestly, I don't know. You gotta go to like the reptile show and find the person that has them there. Because I've seen people use them, but I haven't found them. Okay. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, exactly. So the next thing I had on here was not feeding your captive geckos the wild insect. And I find that to be like, it can be problematic, but there's also safe times when you can do it. If you have like a spot where you know there's not pesticides, you're monitoring it for, I don't know, there's like bug parasites. That's something I'm not super versed in, but the bugs can harbor parasites, specifically like Cryptosporidium, which is why I steer away from crickets a lot of times. unwanted testing pesticides, something you don't want to give your gecko, especially in captivity, because that will just fester. In the wild, they have different opportunities to escape certain things or get what they need whenever they need it. In captivity, they're kind of locked in enclosure, and they only get what you provide. So when I have baby geckos, typically about this time of year, I feed them every day, and that's like my favorite thing to do. That's why I have a lot of them, because I love feeding them. They eat a lot and they grow basically overnight. So I'll feed the babies every day, feed the adults about 2 or 3 times a week, and I always provide supplements for them. I use these every time I feed them. I even have a little dish in the enclosure that has D3 calcium, multivitamins in it. And like when you feel like you need a piece of fruit, it's kind of how they'll feel. They'll go and lick it up out of the dish. D3 is extremely important for proper bone growth. Without the D3 vitamins, they can develop metabolic bone disease, MBD, and their bones will kind of break, and it's irreversible. Once you get there, it's done. What's done is done. You just know you're gonna put a little cast on your little gecko's arm, and it can get so bad that they die from it. So I mean, it's important that you're watching your gecko, make sure that he can get around. Providing D3 is the number one thing I tell everybody that buys a gecko is you have to have this with it. So I have this Repticalcium on my website, something that I usually sell with the animal. And the recipe that I personally use is osteoform SA to 3 parts bionate. I get that from Amazon. You can get it, I don't know where else. I get it from Amazon. 1 part osteoform, 3 parts bionate. Yeah, and I dust them every day, or every time I feed them. There's very much more stuff. I keep pushing the wrong button. Alright, so enrichment. You want to keep your gecko like happy, right? You don't want it to be in there being bored all the time. So enrichment, I mean, that's basically an activity that stimulates any of the 5 senses. You can put something that smells or looks different in there, and that is counting as enrichment. Some things that I do are switching up the feeder insects, rearranging the decorations, adding new decorations. I use a lot of recyclable materials, so I'll go through the recycling bin in my house and just pull out little plastic boxes or little cups. Paper towel tubes are perfect. And things that I can move, like basically from one enclosure to the next. I've got a ton of geckos, so I'm not going out to the reptile shop buying new sticks all the time. Typically I'm using things that I have in my house already, and I can move it from one enclosure to the next one on like a weekly basis, keep them kind of busy. Put something new in there, they'll check it out right away. Even safe exposure to conspecifics can include a form of enrichment. I wouldn't leave them unsupervised, but you can, if you have multiple geckos, you might put 1 or 2. Let them like look at each other, sniff around each other. Like people, sometimes geckos don't get along very well, so it's important that you're supervising them at the same time. This is how you keep it fun and exciting. Keeping reptiles, I mean, some people get bored of it quickly, and this is a way that you can keep it fun for yourself. A lot of people get a leopard gecko and then kind of want, well, maybe I want a bearded dragon. So don't treat it like a bearded dragon, but also give it like more opportunity, give yourself more opportunity to have fun with it.
Could you step aside for a minute so I can see the picture? Oh.
Actually, I sculpted that with a polymer clay and I painted it just so I can get this picture. So some do's and don'ts when it comes to husbandry. Use a thermostat and a temperature gun to monitor your temperatures. I always have a thermostat, I always have a temperature gun. I'm using it almost constantly. Every time I go in there, I have 2 temperature guns in the room. And I'm always checking the temps, making sure nothing's overheating. That's a good way to start fire or your gecko. Experiment with your enclosure, settings, and decorations. Like I said, what works for me may not work for you, what works for somebody else may not work for everybody. So what's up with your situation? Make sure that you're on that, right? Don't set it and forget it. Treat your gecko with respecto. I had people will come to me when they have an issue sometimes. I had somebody come to me and say, hey, like, why is my gecko's tail rotting? And I was like, okay, well, what's going on? Have you done anything weird? Like, she's like, yeah, sometimes I suck on the tail.
What?
So I figured this last one needs to be said.
Wait, what?
Don't put the geckos in your mouth.
Okay, some people just don't deserve that.
What? Wow. Go back.
Wait, go back 1 second.
I've never once looked at a reptile
That-
and thought,
I mean-
that belongs in my house. Oh my God.
That is close to the tail, right? Like,
Yeah.
I hope we just pin it off. So this is a wild type leopard gecko. This is what you'll see more commonly. This is like a normal. The baby, that's a normal there. They kind of grow and expand their colors as they get older. They'll use their tongue to sense things. They have tail autonomy, so they can drop their tail. Each one of these segments here can pop off individually. Their bone has a segment in it that can break, and their blood vessels are able to separate as well, so they don't lose a lot of blood. It's not like super detrimental to their health, and they will start to regenerate a tail right away. Just a few things about the leopard gecko. I wanted you to see it. I mean, we haven't really looked at it yet. I'm just kind of talking about it so far. Here's the difference. Up here, this is something I pulled from Instagram, Google. The female on the right and a male on the left. You can see that the male, has a I don't want to say that. These pores here in the shape of a V. The female might have them. They're like super. They're a lot smaller. When you see the male and the female right next to each other, it's a lot easier to see it. But if you have just one gecko, you might be confused. Like I was with my first gecko. I named him like I don't even remember what his name used to be. And I found out like this is a female, so I had to change it. And I hear about that a lot too. People will be like, "Oh, what is this gecko?" It's just a little diagram. You can look that up. How to sex your gecko, and this image will pop back up. So about the genetics, these are kind of there's a lot of gecko genetics out there. We've been working with geckos since the 60s. So there's a lot of like random morphs, line breeds, things will just kind of pop out on their own. These are almost like building blocks for what we're going to get to. I mean, where we're at today, I guess. These are all just or not all of them, but some basic recessive genes. First, we'll have the Tremper albinos. That's the most popular morph that we have out. So typically, the giants all have a Tremper albino connected to them. So Trempers are the biggest. Bells. These are all bells here, bell albinos, and rainwater albino. There's 3 strains of albino with the leopard geckos. It's important that you don't cross them. They're all a little bit different. Like I said, the Trempers are the biggest. This is a bell here, but he kind of has like a Tremper color. They're more like lavender and yellow. The bells get a little bit more of a brown hue. The rainwaters are like, they're pretty similar to the Trempers as well.
So you were saying that it's important not to cross those?
Right.
Does it result in like severe genetic defects, or?
I have heard that some people will say like that the albinos can create a single visual. Like it wouldn't. Sometimes it'll make. I don't know. My theory that I had for a long time was that you would get a double het animal. But I've also heard that if you breed the albino like Tremper to a bell, you might still get albinos. And the reason that you want to cross them also because it's like a leaky pipe in a ladder of genetics. It's like a leaky pipe. It might let other things come into it that are like detrimental to the gecko's health. But you'll also never be able to get back to a pure animal. You're just kind of dirtying up the lines. The more if you bred a leopard gecko, if you had a double visual, you can never get a pure Tremper or a pure bell from that ever again. And you're kind of dirtying up the lines. Everything's going to be possible het for Tremper or bell, and it might pop up in somebody else's collection down the line where they think that they have something unique, and it's just a double visual albino.
Are you familiar with the English strain?
Yeah.
What causes that?
It's a neurological issue. It's kind of like I don't know what causes it, but it's connected to the gene. It's something called Enigma syndrome, where they just kind of can't walk and balance on their own. I've seen them like roll over on their backs, kind of walking in circles, looking up at the sky. It's not ideal.
Yeah.
I know some people will try and work it out and breed the Enigma syndrome out of the Enigmas, but I think it's kind of past that. The Enigmas have been out for a long time. So I mean, I don't work with them. I don't think anybody else should be working with them either.
So my response.
Yeah, so that's
The Enigma. I
right.
have one that
100%.
Straight out all the time.
Yeah, I've seen a lot. And I've seen some that are healthy and don't seem like they have the Enigma syndrome,
Yeah.
but they'll still pass on the Enigma syndrome to other
Yeah.
geckos. And it's a dominant gene.
I think this guy's, you know,
Yeah.
because you got him from a breeder.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So these are all recessive genes. Like I covered the albinos. The eclipse gene, this is this one here, it kind of messes with the eye pigment. I have a couple, or I might have one here that you can look at after I'm finished presenting. But I brought this one with me so you can see the different eye changing. The pigment in the front, sometimes it could be any percentage of the eye that's affected. But my favorite is when they have like this, it almost looks like a big pupil in the front where they're looking forward all the time. So they have, she's halfway pigmented on her eyes. It takes off a little bit of pigment from the nose, from the feet, and the tip of the tail. It's even gone so far recently where the eclipse gene is taking off pigment all the way around the back and the neck. It almost looks like a pied ball python. Murphy's pattern, this is another one of my favorites. This is the gene of the animal that I had that used to jump out of the enclosure. So the baby here kind of has a lot of pattern, but he'll grow out of that and look more like this one. Marble eye is almost similar to eclipse. It messes with the eye pigmentation. I don't have a picture of that one up here. NDBE, nor does your black eyes. That's a tangerine strain that's proven to be recessive, and it has black eyes. Sometimes those will have really small eyes as well. And the cipher, this one on the far left. This is a new recessive gene. I think it came out like last year. I'm pretty sure it was Gecko Boa that hatched the first one. It's from a marble eye group. So far, it's nothing like super spectacular, but there's a long way to go with them still because it's a new recessive gene. This still kind of looks a little bit normal, but it gives us this stripe on the back. I don't know a whole lot about it because it's still brand new, but there's, like I said, a long way to go with that. These are dominant genes. We have gem snow, tug snow, white, yellow, and I mean, there's not a lot of dominant genes, and they kind of look the same anyway. This is a tug snow here. Gem snow looks almost exactly the same. White and yellow, it's hard to describe. You don't see a white and yellow by itself. It's typically connected to a tangerine or an albino strain. And like we talked about with the Enigma, it jumbles up the pattern on the animal and gives them spots basically all over. You have an Enigma basically of any gene that we talked about so far, and it will just make it look completely different than it did without the Enigma syndrome, or without the Enigma gene. But along with the Enigma gene comes the Enigma syndrome, which throws off the equilibrium of the gecko. I've seen them roll over and almost do backflips sometimes. They'll bite their own tails off on occasion.
Sounds like the spider gene is all python.
That's a great comparison. So we'll go on to polygenetic line bred traits. This is where most of the leopard gecko morphs are coming from. You can take any one trait and line breed it very quickly because they have a quick generation time. So any of these normal, I mean, as long as it's not albino, it's tangerine, it's typically a line bred thing. Right here is a emerine, blood, tangerine tornado. So there's 3 different strains of tangerine there. Kind of just building on little building blocks. You have one gecko that looks a certain way, and you get to another gecko that looks a certain way until you get the result that you're looking for. So that's where the melanistic line for Black Knight comes from. Black Knight is from Perry Zerman. I think he's from Spain. There's a lot of tangerine lines. Striped animals. This is a striped, old stripe, Max Snow here. Hypo, people are a little bit confused about it. My theory is it's also line bred. Hypo takes off some of the pigmentation on the back. So you would have basically this here is a super hypo. Shouldn't have any black spots. And this is like hyper, right? So hypomelanistic, and this is hypermelanistic. So hypo kind of takes out some of the melanism. Super hypo is there's 0 black spots on the animal. Hypo, you can have spots on the head, and super hypo, you would have no spots on the head. So, incomplete dominant genes, there's only 2 that I know of. The Max Snow, which is this one here. This is like a juvenile They typically come out very black and white, but they'll grow into a little bit of yellow colors. And then so the incomplete dominant is almost like a visual recessive. I'm sure some of you guys know how the genes work. But in case you don't, you would have one animal with one copy and another animal with another copy. If you breed those together, you have a super form. And if you have a super form, you can pass on 100% will be single copy animals, unless you breed to another animal that has another copy of the same gene. Does that make sense? So this is super snow here. This is the max snow. It looks almost completely different. You still kind of strike because they come from a striped lineage. The other incomplete dominant gene that I know about is the lemon frost. This is probably the coolest leopard gecko I've ever seen. I haven't worked them in my collection, but I've worked them in other people's collections, and they're just as cool in person as they are on the internet. There's a super lemon frost, which comes when you breed a lemon frost to a lemon frost. But there's something also connected to the lemon frost gene that causes cancerous tumors. They get really big. I mean, they'll probably exist healthy for a year or a year and a half, and they'll start to develop these tumors. So they can come over any part of the body. It's detrimental to the gecko's health. A lot of times they don't survive, and they get so big that they will pop. Here's an example of that. Yeah, I've seen it get pretty bad. So it's something I wouldn't encourage anybody to work with anymore. I know a few people are still trying to like breed it out of the animal. I know people have spent like a lot of money working with genetics, genetic like scientists to try and cross it out or outcross it, and it's just not working. So I kind of overlooked that one, even though it's really cool. It kind of has to be lost to history. These are all combination morphs of genes that we covered already. These were named for marketing reasons. Basically, if you were a leopard gecko breeder, you want to get other people to buy your animals. So you'd be like, oh, check this out, I have something brand new. Even though it's just a double visual of a recessive, or you can combine line bred traits, you can put dominant traits with any of these to make something different. There's a whole lot of combination morphs. So it's basically anything that we covered so far can be combined and have a new name. These are the most common ones that you'll see like at the reptile show. Raptor, it's an acronym. I kind of forget what the acronym stands for. It's like red, something, orange, I don't know. Anyway, it's tremper eclipse. That's all you have to really know. At this point, it's any tremper eclipse animal can be labeled a raptor. Belly clips is just a radar. I mean, radar is just belly clips. Blazing blizzard is an albino blizzard. Typically, that's a tremper unless it's labeled like bell or rainwater blazing blizzard. White knight, belly clips blizzard. I mean, you guys can read. Take pictures if you want. If you have a Blanco and White Knight are like the two that I get confused sometimes, just because they look the exact same. Once you add Blizzard in there, you can't really go back. So I don't have a lot of Blizzards. I have a couple of them, but I'm not like introducing them to new lines a lot of times, just because it takes a lot out of the animal. But the result is just a white animal. So it's like you can add more pattern, more yellow. So something that, I mean, they're cool, don't get me wrong, I like them, but it's just not my favorite. Total Eclipse, that's a pretty cool one. A couple years ago they were called Galaxies, but now they're called Total Eclipse for whatever reason. It's a super snow eclipse, and like I said, the eclipse gene can be line bred so much that it takes out a lot of pigment on the animal. Super snow is that very spotty one I showed you a couple slides back, there's one here. So you can actually take out, I mean, you can see she has like white hands, white feet. It would take out a lot of pattern around the tail, around the back. So typically you'll see it around the neck. Why leopard geckos are so popular, I think this is one of my last slides. It's because leopard geckos have been traded as early as the 1960s. They were collected from the wild and traded to people in Europe and the USA in the 1960s. They're docile and hardy animals. They're not super big, so you can keep them like in something that's not super big either. Makes them more attractive to people that keep reptiles. They're widely used in model organisms in the laboratory for experiments and like genetic studies, and they have a short generation time, so it's perfect for that. There's a lot of resources out. People have been keeping them for a long time. There's a lot of people that breed them. So there's a lot of YouTube videos, scientific papers. They're relatively easy to keep and breed. I wouldn't say it's like the easiest animal, but they're up there. People call them a starter reptile, which is like something I would say either, but that's kind of an advertising thing, marketing. They have a low price point because they're so prolific. A lot of people keep them, a lot of people breed them. So you'll see a ton of them at the show, and they're not like super expensive. Like I've seen boas go for like $10,000. I've never heard of that besides the first lemon frost.
What are the most expensive?
The most expensive right now, probably the Black Knights, pure Black Knight from Barry Zimmerman. I've seen those go for $2,500. The most expensive one that I've ever heard of was the original Lemon Frost, Mr. Frosty. They produced at Rotocro and then bought at an auction at one of the super shows for $10,000. Yeah. I think that dude actually made like $1 million first year too. Wow. Before he found out that they have that cancer gene. So they do have like a semi-low price point, and there's a low bar for entry because they're easy to keep, easy to breed. Basically anybody can do it. So it's important that you are also doing your research on the person that you got your gecko from. You want to choose the right gecko. There's a lot of things that go into that. Make sure the vent's clear, making sure the animal's healthy and eating. If I was going to buy a gecko, there's only a few people that I'd buy it from. So that's a big step. I think that's pretty much it. Here are some resources. If you guys want to look into it on your own, you can find information about UVB and the care sheet from reptiles.com. UVB for your leopard geckos is something that's like, it's a little bit complex. You don't want to give them too much UVB, you don't want to give them too little. So you need to have a UVI measuring thingy, and then you can figure out how to, like how much UVB they actually need and how much you're giving. If they get too much, they can get a sunburn, they can go blind. And if they get too little, they can develop MDD. So that's why I use the multivitamins with the D3 calcium. Also have an ambient light in the room, so it's not like they're really missing out on light cycle, but not having UV light. MSCon, that's the research we covered where they had the different environments on one of the beginning slides, the ambassador, that was where they were found in the tree. There's some information on genetics can be found on Morph Market. When I was first getting into it, I was on Morph Market like every day, just looking at the new animal posted, trying to figure out what am I looking at, and that helped me out a lot. But it's also important to ask questions. If you guys have any questions, you can always send me a message on GeckBro.com, GeckBro on basically any of the social media platforms. I'll include my email in the next slide. This is a Herp HQ video. This is one of my favorite YouTube videos. It kind of covers the same thing that I talked about today, how they're not exactly from the desert. New information coming out. And Herp HQ is a good resource just for, basically, they cover a lot of different animals on their YouTube channel, so I would check them out. Amphibian Foundation, I studied with them a couple times. That's where I got my Master Herpetologist certificate. Captive husband, they have a captive husbandry certificate as well. Finally, my website is where you can find me and animals that I produce. I have a gallery there, so you can see some animals that I produce on the gallery. Oops. Did you get it?
Quick.
This is it. So this is me in the Philippines. I found some house geckos.
Yeah.
This is in the Philippines.
No.
Where is it?
That's in Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. I know where P. Yeah, Puerto Rico, and I found these house geckos. I freaked out. So thanks for listening. Thanks for coming to my talk today. GeckBro, visit GeckBro.com, or you can contact me at GeckBro@yahoo.com if you have any questions. Happy to talk to you guys. That's it.
Great. Oh, you got questions?
I have a question. So do we still, like, if I was going to go to a show and I wanted to buy a leopard gecko, do I have to worry about, is this an imported gecko or all the geckos?
All the geckos now are captive bred. I'm pretty sure it's illegal to remove the geckos from the wild as of 2000. I haven't heard of any macularius geckos being imported. I have seen like some animals that I haven't seen on the market before, like Saturpinensis, I think, which is a macularius or a uliferous gecko, which looks almost the exact same, but I think they come from a separate area, so you won't get uliferous macularius.
Okay. And then when I'm picking on a gecko, are there certain signs where I know that maybe this is a stick gecko?
So if you were to see an animal that's like very, very small, typically I'll wait till about 15 grams to sell my geckos before so I know that they're growing well. There's at that point they're past the point of like not thriving. If you might see a gecko that's really small or has a really skinny tail. I brought a bunch of geckos up here so you can see what a healthy gecko looks like. They can have a couple, maybe one or two juveniles. But you might see them really small, really skinny tail. They have like a dirty vent that could be like impaction. They might have a leaky nose or closed eyes, stuck shed. If you were to see an animal that has like so they'll have a big plump tail. I'll show you back that wild type. Or here, these are. So they'll have a tail that's like big and plump like this almost. Let me show you some more animals. Okay, yeah. Here's a good picture. Maybe not. Okay, I like these ones. So you see they have a big plump tail. It's like really filled out. When they're dehydrated, it'll kind of get a little bit wrinkly. It'll sink in a little bit. It'll still be big and fat, but it won't be like perfectly plump. And that's just an issue with dehydration. Sometimes these people will keep their animals in the cut for like a long time, longer than that. I usually pack my geckos on like a Saturday morning if I'm going to a reptile show, and I'll unpack them on Sunday. And it'll take me, I'll be up until 2 in the morning, but I think that's an important step when it comes to keeping animals and having them displayed properly. Did that cover it?
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Just kind of a personal question. I see you've been to Puerto Rico, right?
Yes, sir.
Have you been to those other countries that you showed up on your
I haven't. No, I would love to though.
Iran?
No, sir. I think that'd be really cool. It was one of my dreams to go see them in the wild. I've heard that they're not the easiest animal to find though, which is why there's like conflicting information about where they come from. And there's limited resources for natural history when it comes to leopard geckos. A lot of information is like very old or generally incorrect.
So India would be a good place for you there. Is that
Right, yeah, for sure.
What's your favorite food?
My favorite? I really like the bell albinos. These ones here, these are all babies that I produced last year, just because it's like, the tremper is the most popular. I really like the rainwaters too. You can't go wrong. The bells, there's something special about them. One of my first geckos was bell albino. The second one or the third one I got was a bulge stripe. So I have a bulge striped bell here that came from both of those projects kind of being together. That's probably my favorite. There's some that I think are really cool, like the Eclipse is really cool because it takes out some of the eye pigment. Sometimes they'll look like they're looking forward, and it's just so cute to me. If you look at the gecko from like a certain angle, it can look like they're smiling, and that's when the Eclipse gene really takes a punch.
So I know you talked about evolving animal husbandry. Back when I got mine in the research I was doing, everybody was saying don't keep them on the substrate, not
Right.
everybody's keep them on the substrate.
Yeah, that's right. So that's something that, along with the adaptive husbandry, I've seen. It's a certain type of sand that you don't want to use. They used to sell like a calcium sand, which is the type that the animal will lick up if they don't have the proper supply of D3 calcium. So as long as you have a proper supply of D3 calcium, typically I'll feed them out of a dish too. You can, they're smart and they learn quick. You can almost train your gecko to eat off tongs or eat out of a dish. So as long as you're not like forcing them to eat the substrate, you should be fine. There's certain substrates that I would recommend too, like something organic that they can pass, like the cocoa fiber or a ABG mix, Atlantic Botanical Garden mix, made up of just organic matter again.
I had one for 15 years, and I was trying to help deal with stuff shed
Okay.
issue. And I had her in a very shallow dish of water, and she flipped over on her back and drowned.
Oh yeah, see, they do like to be dry. They like humid places, but they like to be dry as well. So if you were to have stuck shut on your animal, I would recommend just putting them in like a little sandwich tub that has a little bit of water, maybe not like water, but like a moist paper towel in there. Leave it in there for an hour. Make sure you have an air hole in there, or just provide a moist hide in your enclosure. and they should be able to go in there and regulate their humidity. It's easy. A lot of times it can be easy to shut off if you catch it in time.
Seeing the environment, they come from totally explains a lot, because
Right.
I understand with all high desert, there's some vegetation, but not
That's
a
it.
lot.
That's what I thought for a long time too. And like into their environment, I was like, they must have come from like the Sahara, sandy dunes. But that's not really the case. I've seen when you're looking on iNaturalist specifically, you'll see a lot of animals living in the city or in highly vegetated areas.
It came home high issues, a lot of other issues.
Right. Yeah, so
Well, I think that was part of the husbandry issue too, because we, our understanding was dry at that time.
right. Yeah. I mean, you do want to keep them dry, but you want to have a level of humidity or multiple levels of humidity so they can select some eggs.
I have another question.
I love your
So if I was going to get a gecko and I wanted one that was going to grow up to be a big gecko, and really outgoing, is there, like, have you noticed with all your geckos, are they sexually dimorphic? Like, for the size, do the males and the females get bigger?
I have seen
And
the
as
males,
far
yeah.
as like their personality,
Okay.
are males more outgoing, or is it pretty much just each gecko would be it?
So each gecko kind of has its own personality. In my experience, I work with a lot of geckos, and typically the males are a little bit more friendly. Females have something to protect, so they might be a little bit more standoffish. But I mean, it's to each their own. The geckos are very much individuals. As for the sexual dimorphism, the males will have typically a wider head because they're gonna grab onto the female. They have to have like a stronger jaw. Typically, they'll have a slimmer tail, a slimmer body, but they'll get a little bit longer sometimes. If you want something really big, you might look into like tremper genes or giant genes. One of the guys around here is actually the person that holds the record for the biggest gecko in the world. And that came from Geckos, etc. Yeah, Steve Sykes. And he had, I don't, it might have been like a one-off thing where he had this animal, I think his name was Godzilla, hatch out. And so any giants that we get today are typically traced back to Godzilla or Zeus, which was his son, which got even bigger. So I'll look into trempers, and that gene was connected to trempers at first. Trempers do usually get the biggest out of all three of any of the recessive genes or any of the recessive mentioned so far. Typically trempers are the biggest, and I think it has to do with something with a giant gene connected to that.
And they're healthy?
Yeah, they're healthy. They are albino, so it's not like tangerine or a normal type, which is like they have a little bit of light sensitivity. So you go out like take a picture of them outside and then closing their eyes. But my first gecko I got as an adult when I got like more into reptiles. I got my first leopard gecko. It was a tremper albino, and she was great. Yeah, I liked her a lot. You can't really go wrong. Besides with like the run across the image.
And the eclipse, or no, they
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just curious, I don't know if you covered it, but, in the wild, the ones that are in the wild still, do you find specific areas where they range to be the largest in specific areas? Like you'll find them much bigger in these
That's a good
areas.
question. So they have a strain or a species, Euploperis afghanicus, I think, which comes, obviously probably from Afghanistan. There's a certain range in Afghanistan where it comes from. And those are the smallest of the leopard geckos.
Okay.
There's another one, Angramaniu, which comes from Iran. And those are the biggest of the Euploperis. If you were to see that Angramaniu next to an Afghanicus, your jaw would drop. They're like, they look like a little dog. You could hop on and ride them down the street. They're huge. So Euploperis angramaniu is the biggest. Euploperis afghanicus, I believe, is the smallest. And those aren't exactly common leopard geckos. They're more localities. They're different species altogether.
Yeah.
But they're basically the same thing.
Yeah. So do you find like in those areas based on environmental conditions, that's the reason why they've
That's
gotten
a pretty
bigger?
good question. Yeah, I haven't looked into that so much. I don't personally keep Afghanicus or Angramaniu. I'm interested in them, but they're a little bit harder to find. I only know one person that has like female Afghanicus available right now. And then I only know Steve Sykes, who has Angermanias. And they're a little bit more on the expensive side. I think I've seen them go like $1,200 to $1,800 per animal for the Angermanias. Afghanicus typically was like $150, $200. Those are cool. Those are some of my favorites though. Cool. Good question, Jason.
So let's go to Iran and get a big one.
Yeah.
Actually, the size, you're saying that your Iranian ones are the biggest geckos in the world.
The biggest ferrets, to my
Biggest,
knowledge.
okay. Because I've got lychee geckos.
Okay, yeah. Lychees, I think, are the biggest gecko people.
Yeah.
I had a tokay gecko back a couple years ago, which was 2 feet long. And I went out there one day, and the enclosure was just a little bit open. And I was like, oh man, he wasn't in there. So every day for a week, I would go out to, I kept him in the garage. I had this tent in the garage where I keep a lot of my animals. I'd go out there every day for a week in the middle of the night to see if I could hear him yelling his name, right? Little Tokay. So I was out there and I heard him on like the 3rd or 4th night when I went out there. I heard him. He was right in between the wall and the dryer. He was a big gecko. He was not nice. Yeah.
If you want, you kept one in his house to keep stuff.
Okay.
And if you wanted to catch it, you'd go find where it was and stick his head like up on the sofa and come out again.
Yeah, exactly.
They did. The first geckos you hatched, you ate.
Oh yeah, I did. I kept her. I kept her sibling. I kept the mom. I still have all of them. Those were crested geckos. The first one, her name was Rico, and I paired her to Turtle, and the baby was named Trico.